I don't care. Get on the ground. I don't care that you're scared. Get on the ground.
Do anything. So why?
Get on the ground.
I have no idea why.
Get on the ground. Get on the ground.
I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Are you recording? I didn't do anything. I'm recording. I didn't. Okay.
On August 8th, 2025, deputies with the Marion County Sheriff's Office in Florida were called to a credit union after a man tried to deposit a $1 million check into a business account opened just 6 days earlier. That account carried a negative balance, so suspicious bank staff ran facial recognition on the customer. The name on the account did not match the face in their records. This is how a forged check and a stolen identity unraveled. The investigation began the night before. A detective took a report from a teller who explained that the customer had opened a business account on August 1st using a Washington driver's license, then returned to deposit $1 million. The teller recognized the obvious as an account only days old, deep in the red, was suddenly receiving a 7-figure deposit, so the check was held, not cashed. Facial recognition matched the customer to a man named Mark Anthony Taylor from Miami.
Alright, so the teller affidavit, and then I have the check that this guy presented, but I guess this kind of runs deeper. Usually it's just like someone running into a scam, but I guess this guy's actually like stolen the identity of another individual. My loss prevention manager wanted me to call her while you guys are here, so let me call her real quick.
Do you have any information on this guy?
She's gonna have everything for you.
Okay.
I guess she does know like the true identity. I guess they've used facial recognition or something to track him down, but I'll let her kind of get into all that. I don't really know much more than that. But when he presented this last night, I was like, yeah, we're holding that. That's probably fake. He just opened his account 6 days ago and it was in the red by $1 when he deposited his $1 million check. So.
Yeah. You're not in jail, any mileages, you're 70.
Were you here when he came in?
Yeah, last night.
Was he wearing anything covering his face?
He didn't. He was wearing a hat and sunglasses, but we had remove sunglasses, obviously. Yes.
Were you able to provide them with the image of the check?
They have, I thought I was giving them the actual check.
Yeah, you can give it to them.
Okay, yeah, so they have the check and they have a teller affidavit.
Perfect. Do they have any questions for me as to the situation?
They were asking me if we have any information on this individual, the one that walked in, so I'm just gonna move my phone over to the deputy here.
Yeah.
Alright, so this is Tiffany.
Hi, Tiffany, Deputy Klusterman.
Hi, so we did run facial recognition on this individual. We were able to confirm his identity.
Okay.
So I can send that over to Trent for your records.
That's perfect.
Looks like he's down in Miami. One second, I'm just trying to find the case here.
Is this you guys' first run-in with him?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
First run-in with him, never seen this guy before. He just thought he was going to come in, and he established his business, I believe, on 6/18 of 2025. It was registered on Sundays at that time. And then he just established these business accounts here. I'm not even sure if this is a real business. I guarantee you this is not a valid check.
But the account and the Washington license used to open it carried a completely different name. Greg Sullivan Cooper. The business attached to it, Cooper Legacy Builders, had been registered with the state only weeks earlier. This evidence matters legally. The Fourth Amendment requires probable cause to arrest. A held forged check, a fake Washington license, a facial recognition match, and a sworn teller affidavit gave deputies far more than enough to act under. Florida Statute, Section 831.02, uttering a forged instrument is a third-degree felony. The offense is complete the moment a person knowingly presents a false instrument with intent to defraud. The scale also triggers Florida Statutes, Section 8.034. The scheme to defraud law. When an organized scheme to defraud exceeds $50,000, it becomes a felony of the first degree.
We're not able to confirm or deny either way, but we definitely know for sure that this is identity theft.
Okay. So you said 6/18/25 he opened an account?
He opened the account here now that was when he registered the business on Sundays. He established the account here I'll give you that date. August 1st, 2025.
Okay.
In Haines City, Florida.
In Haines City. So he opens the account with his driver's license is, excuse me, is Miami, and then,
The driver's license is Washington.
oh geez, okay.
Yeah, so if I can actually give you an image of that driver's license that we have on file.
Yeah, so that's a fraudulent.
496 or so.
Oh, I see. Okay, so Mark Anthony Taylor is his fraudulent ID.
No, Mark Anthony Taylor is the actual.
Correction, 796. Can you have 5 minutes to respond?
Okay. I just want to make sure my notes are.
Yeah, Greg Sylvan Cooper is the identity theft name that he's used to establish the account.
Okay. And so Greg Cooper's address is this Miami Beach address.
Correct. Well, no, Greg Cooper's is address.
Okay.
The Miami address is of the actual individual, true identity. Yes.
Okay. I got a bunch of notes. I just want to make sure I keep them straight.
You're right.
Man, this guy is giving us the runaround.
I'm just gonna grab the copy of that.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, that seems like all the information that I need.
Can I give you
Yes.
my direct line so that you can call me if you have any additional questions?
Yes, please.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Tiffany.
guys. Let me know if you need anything else.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Out here, now! Outside!
What? Hold on, I didn't do
Get on the
anything.
ground.
Why?
Get on the ground.
I didn't do anything.
Get on the ground.
I didn't do anything.
Get on the ground.
What do you?
Inside Speedway. On the ground. On the ground, I'll pop you. I'm gonna light you up, buddy, I'm telling
What
you.
do you mean?
You move, I'm gonna light you up.
What up, sir? I didn't.
Get on the ground.
For what?
Get on the ground.
What am I? What,
I told you why.
Well, no, I didn't.
Get on the
I
ground.
want to know why are you? What? What did
Get
I
on the
do?
ground, now.
What did I do,
Get on the ground.
sir? I didn't do anything.
Get on the ground.
I didn't do anything.
Get on the ground. Tell you, go get lit up.
I didn't do anything. Why are
You
you?
hear me? The minute you move, you get popped.
Why are you gonna pop me? I didn't
You
do
move and you
anything.
can get popped. Go that door.
I don't understand what you want.
Get on the ground.
I don't. What did I do, sir?
The bank. You know what I'm talking about. Get on the ground.
What about it?
Get on the
I
ground.
don't know what you're saying about that.
Get
I literally-
on the
I'm
ground.
literally coming here to get a cigarette and go back.
Get on the ground.
What's going on?
Get on the ground.
I don't understand what's going on, so you're not telling me what's
Get
going on.
on the ground.
You're just coming up to me.
I'm telling you to get on the ground. That's what I'm telling you, and you're not doing it.
Huh?
You're getting on the ground, or I'm gonna pop you.
But I didn't do anything.
Get on the ground. Get on the ground.
But sir, I don't know what you're talking about. No way.
Get on the ground. The second you move, you're getting popped. You understand that?
Okay, I'm doing.
Do you understand that?
But sir, what do you? I don't even understand.
Sir, move out the way.
I don't understand what you're even. What's going on?
I just told you what's going on. The bank. Get on the ground.
Okay, what about the bank?
You know what?
No, I don't.
You know what? What's your
No, I have
name?
no clue. Greg, what you talking
Yeah,
about?
your name's not Craig Cooper. Get on the ground.
I don't have no idea what you're talking
Get on the ground.
about. Sir, I have no idea what you're talking
Get
about.
on the ground.
And I fear.
Get on the ground.
Why are you like?
I don't care. Get on the ground. I don't care that you're scared. Get on the
I didn't do
ground.
anything. So why?
Get on the ground.
I have no idea why you didn't do anything.
Get on the ground.
I didn't do anything, sir.
Get on the ground.
I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Are you recording? I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Okay.
I'm gonna get tased. Do you understand?
Need another side. Listen, I'm gonna roll you on your side. I want you to tuck your legs so we can sit you up.
Yes, sir.
You ready? We're gonna just sit you up here. So grab the sword. Okay, ready? If you want to use your leg, we're gonna push it. Ready? 1, 2, 3, up.
No ID.
There's an ID on him.
Oh, yeah, identify yourself as Greg Cooper.
Subseat,
Get extra card.
Alright, man, I'm gonna read you your rights, okay? So just listen, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to talk to a lawyer and have them present with you while you're being questioned. If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, one will be appointed to represent you before any questioning if you wish. You can decide at any time to exercise these rights and not answer any questions or make any statements. Do you understand those rights?
Yes.
Okay, so what's going on here?
Can I ask what am I being charged for?
Right now, you resisted us because we detained you based off of what was going on at the bank.
I didn't resist anything. I didn't resist anybody.
As far as the sergeant was giving you commands to stop and you didn't listen?
I didn't.
So
I didn't understand why I was even being. I didn't even understand why I was even being, pursued or
So
anything.
tell me what happened with the check.
I'm not sure, sir. I'm just a normal guy. Like I said, a normal guy. I don't know what may or may have been the case with anything, so I have no idea what's going on.
Zach, can you?
You're telling me you never tried to deposit a check or anything a while back under the name Greg Cooper? Is that your actual name, Greg Cooper?
Like I said, sir, I have no idea what's going on. I just wanted to know why I was being detained.
Right now, you're being detained for resisting, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. Okay. Just do me a favor, swing in. You're not under arrest at this time. We'll let you know what's happening. Okay?
Hello, Mark. My name's Jason. I'm Deputy Policeman in Marion County Sheriff's Office. So I'm the one who originally took the report at Mid-Florida Bank when you came up here beginning of August. You have that business account, Cooper Legacy Builders. You had that $1 million check. And so I'm the one who went to the bank. I ID'd you. We saw you on camera. The bank ID'd you. That Washington driver's license that you have and everything. So the reason that I'm talking to you right now is I just want to know why were you doing that? Like, do you need the money? Are you in trouble in any way? I mean, $1 million is a lot of money. I'm sorry?
I can't really say too much.
Can't say too much? I mean, do you owe people money?
Oh.
I personally, I've never seen a check that big, so I just want to know what you're going, swinging for the fences first time. Just want to make sure you're not in any trouble or you don't caught up with the wrong people. You gotta speak up a little bit.
I'm not sure what to.
Yeah. You can just talk to me. Just tell me why you came up here with the $1 million check and tried to deposit it, and I mean there's got to be a reason for it. I understand being in trouble financially, right? I do, believe it or not. I've had my fair share of ups and downs, and I've needed money in certain situations.
7 days later, Taylor made a critical mistake. He returned to the very same bank, and this time deputies were ready. Dispatch advised that he had left on foot through a nearby gas station lot, and multiple units quickly converged. What follows is a high-risk felony stop. Deputies repeatedly order Taylor to the ground while he insists he has done nothing wrong. The encounter is loud and confrontational, and he appears genuinely confused about why it is happening. Notably, in these opening seconds, the deputies issue commands without first explaining the fraud investigation behind and front them. Taylor asks again and again what he is accused of. Only later is the bank finally mentioned to him by name. The force here is measured against the Supreme Court's decision in Graham versus Garner. Force is judged by what a reasonable officer would do on the scene, weighing the severity of the crime, any immediate threat, and active resistance. Alcohol concentration at Taylor was a felony fraud suspect who repeatedly refused lawful commands. Under this standard, the decision to use hands-on control and bring him to the ground was legally reasonable, even though the encounter looks aggressive to a viewer. One point still deserves scrutiny. A deputy repeatedly threatens to light him up if he moves. The Supreme Court held in Tennessee versus Garner that deadly force is justified only when a suspect poses a serious threat of.
So I just want to make sure that everything, wherever you're from is okay. There's not going to be people looking for you. You're not.
I hope not.
You hope not. What about Greg Cooper? What's that name to you? You're not sure how you got that name or anything like that? Well, let me start by asking you this. Have you been up this way before? Are you from this area?
Florida.
You're from Florida. Okay. You live down in Miami? Or the Miami area?
No.
No? Okay, so what brought you up this way? Family, friends?
Mixture.
A mixture? Who's up here? Are you married? No? Okay, do you live at home alone? Or do you have roommates or anything? Just here and there? Yeah, like I said, man, I just, what I don't want to see happen is some bad people get wind of what happened, and now you got a target on your back, right? So that's why I'm trying to get you to explain to me what was the motivation behind all this.
Bad situation.
Well, we don't want to make a bad situation worse.
True.
Was there a reason you chose $1 million? The reason that piques my curiosity, man, is I've dealt with this a lot, right? People are doing $500 checks, $1,000 checks, and when I got the call for your case, like she's swinging for the fences. This isn't. It's out of the ordinary, which kind of raised a red flag, which is why I wanted to talk to you, right? You're not trying to do $100 here, pay off $1,000 loan shark or something, right? $1 million that's huge.
He's being a little greedy with the million, or what?
I'm not sure.
What's that?
I'm not sure, honestly. I
Just made a bad decision today, or the other day.
That would be
Huh?
That would probably be the reason I do.
All right, and that's fine. People make mistakes. I'm not saying you're not a bad guy. You know what I mean? I can't even see your eyes. You got your shades on, but you don't seem like a bad dude. It just seems like you made a bad decision, and you kind of got a lot of little things stacked up here. So like the fake IDs and the everything else, and so I mean it is what it is, man. Can we do anything for you in the meantime? Like lower the AC a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. And then I guess just from what they told me or what he said to me, as far as that I'm not being arrested, I'm being detained.
Yeah. Right now you are under arrest. Okay. So you are under arrest right now. Okay. Listen, you've been nothing but cool with us. Like you haven't. I don't know what happened before we got here. You haven't been disrespectful or anything like that. Did you take a car up here so it doesn't get towed? Can we do you a favor? Maybe someone come get it.
I probably don't.
Huh?
I don't think I necessarily need that.
Okay. Well, if it's left at one of these businesses over here, they're gonna tow it.
Understand?
If it goes to an impound lot, every day that it's there, they're going to be charging, and then eventually that's going to come back to you. So it's going to be thousands of dollars if you can't get a hold of them for a couple of days. So we are trying to do you a solid with your car.
I understand.
Which car is yours?
Like I said, I think I'm okay with that. I understand.
How'd you get up here then?
I understand that. I understand.
All right, but we're gonna close the door here. I'm gonna lower the AC.
Hey, thanks for talking to me. All right.
I do have another question from what you said.
Me?
Yeah. You said I am being arrested.
Yeah.
What? Can you give me more information?
Yeah. So it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be a couple of different fraud type charges. Obviously, uttering the forged instrument, the fake check at the bank. You have you're in possession of a false identification that has your picture on it. I'm not too sure about the other ones, but I know those for sure.
When you said other ones, what do you mean?
Other charges.
What other charges?
That deputy that was talking to you. You're good. That deputy that was talking to you, he's the one that came out here initially and took that report, so he would know all the charges, and we could tell you them before we get you over to the jail. Okay.
I would like that.
Yeah, we'll get you that, and they'll be able to tell you if there's a bond and all that.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I'm not going to keep you in the dark.
Taylor was nonviolent and had no visible weapon. While these threats appear intended as compliance pressure rather than a real plan to fire, the language sits uneasily against the Garner standard and marks a missed chance to de-escalate. Once Taylor is on the ground, the tone shifts. Deputies calmly roll him onto his side and sit him upright. Using controlled, deliberate movements, no strikes are thrown and no weapon is deployed. The arrest ends without any injury. With Taylor secured, a deputy advises him of his rights. The recitation tracks Miranda versus Arizona precisely, protecting his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, including the right to silence and the right. The detective who first took the report then conducts the interview, using textbook rapport building and a calm voice. Taylor largely declines to engage, saying little, which is exactly what his right to remain silent allows him to do. Taylor also held fake identification with his own photo, but another man's details, a felony under Florida Statutes section 3322.12. Using that data is I.212. Using that data identity theft under section 8, 17.568. Taylor was charged with 2 counts of uttering a forged instrument, scheme to defraud, fake identification, and identity theft. He was also linked to attempts in Sarasota and Bradenton, jailed in Marion County, and later entered a plea agreement. The Marion County Sheriff's Office receives a B. Probable cause was strong and the force was lawful under Graham versus Connor. But the grade is held back by poor, early communication and threats of deadly force against an unarmed man. Mark Anthony Taylor receives a D's. He built a false identity, registered a shell business, and presented a $1 million forged check across several counties. He stayed calm after arrest, but the premeditation places him in failing territory. The first lesson is how quickly modern fraud unravels. Facial recognition and shared banking data can expose a fake name in minutes, and presenting a forged check is a completed crime, even if no money ever changes hands. The second lesson is about the stop itself. Refusing lawful commands only raises the danger. The safer path is to comply, while to silence and counsel, and for officers, explaining the reasons and cooperation and reduces risk.